So one of the best public transportations around is having trouble, and it's the bus drivers. They're quitting. No brakes, disrespectful riders, LA Metro bus drivers are quitting. This is Greater Los Angeles, and this is by Kaylee Wells. So I noticed that this was happening, and it seems like it's getting prevalent, um, and it's starting to become a big problem because you have a lot of people who rely on the Big Blue bus, the Metro buses, and the Metrolink. Um, if you're an elderly person or a person that has disabilities and you cannot drive a car, or maybe you have a car and it's more convenient instead of putting, gas prices are really expensive right now, and so maybe the bus is the best way to go. And for a lot of people, it's less wear and tear on your car. Economically, maybe it helps for a lot of people, but we're seeing that the buses have been greatly impacted by, and you know who, the pandemic. So in LA, the Metro bus and the Big Blue bus are stationed in Koreatown right here. You see pictured here last month, nearly 1 in 5 Metro buses, they got canceled. And so if you were standing at the bus stop and the bus seemed like it was far too late, you weren't just making it up or just seeing things. You're right. It was far too late because a lot of the buses have been canceled, and so they're being affected by this staffing shortages. So going into this person's, he's a bus driver, but he's using the name or the abbreviation B because he's protecting his identity. He's worked for the bus company for more than 30 years, and he says that he really enjoys his job, but unfortunately, a lot of bus drivers are quitting. And here's his story. He says he's worked before 5 a.m. and he frequently has to skip breaks. And on what he should be his day off, he doesn't get a day off. He has to go back on duty because he's covering for somebody that either they quit or they call out sick. And that happens often during this pandemic. And so it's happened in other areas, other jobs have had the same issues. So sometimes the people he serves, they yell at him, they spit in his face. Think about it. Right now still in the COVID pandemic, and people spitting in your face. How that must make someone feel like not really coming into work. You feel like you're in an unsafe environment. So the bus driver did not get permission to talk to the media. So we're calling him by the initial B. So B, he's worked for the Metro company for 30 years. He says he's not surprised that the agency is losing employees quicker than they can hire them. So we're often ignored and mistreated, and operators who have been here every day since the beginning, a lot of them, they took off, and this is hard working for LA Metro bus driver, tells the KCRW. B is the kind of guy that you would want as a bus driver. He says hello to everyone who steps on the bus, and he waves through the occasional passengers who can't find enough change to pay their full fare, and he takes pride in his work. So I love driving. Dealing with the bad people really makes it hard, but it just takes one nice person to start the process all over again, he says. But it's pretty clear not all of his colleagues like driving as much as he does. So LA Metro has more than 3,000 bus operators, but they need 450 more operators. So in December, they hired 11 people and they lost 32. Okay, so think about it. They lost more than they hired. So new bus operators are getting a starting pay of 19 an hour, but that's temporarily. It's a pilot program that's increasing the wage from 17.75 an hour. So the minimum wage in LA is about to bump up to 16 an hour, and so 19 doesn't seem like a whole lot of money, especially living here in the metropolitan of LA. Rents are rising and everything. 19 is like change. So B says more pay would go a long way. So the thing that has lowered morale is that essential workers were given raises. Think about it. Nurses, police officers, firefighters, grocery workers, restaurant people. They really went out and gave their employees bonuses for coming to work, B says. But the Metro MTA received a lot of money from what he understood, and he said that they got it from to help with the COVID, but did they get any raises? He said, we're all looking forward to the bonuses and we never got it. And so we're often ignored and we're mistreated as bus drivers. So last year, LA received $3.8 billion in pandemic relief for public transportation, and LA Metro received $1 billion this year. And so the agency did not respond to the request for comment. So in the fall, the Metro buses canceled 10% of its trips. In January, it canceled nearly 18%. See how it escalated? It goes up. The Metro recently announced that later this month it cuts bus services to 12% while it tries to fill hundreds of bus operator positions, but the agency hopes to restore the service in full by June. We shall see. So it's not just the lack of the drivers that's forcing drivers to cancel the trips. But B said when the COVID hit, the Metro decreased service. Buses ran on new, tighter schedules and fewer minutes between the stops. And so it wasn't difficult to keep up when there was no traffic. Fewer people were stopping the bus to get on and off because of the fear of the COVID, of course. I would believe, being on a bus, you don't know who's sick. So traffic's back now that they open things back up. And think about it. SoFi Stadium, the Super Bowl, everybody's wanting to huddle up. They're talking about the endemic. And even though you still got people getting sick and getting infected, I'm pretty sure that they're going to need the buses to run to help get through the traffic to get to the SoFi Stadium. Let's see how that works out. So B, he's still expected to stick to that tight schedule. So his line used to have several buses on it simultaneously, and now it's seen to drop down to about one bus that comes hourly. So it's hard to keep up because literally I don't take breaks, he says. So I have to drive through it, he says. If we're running behind schedule, then I don't get a break. Passengers have noticed the cutbacks in the service. So Brandon Rains, who is a passenger in North Hollywood, he takes the bus often so he can avoid this traffic. Because LA is known for its traffic. They go hand in hand. So now, even when the transit schedule says that his bus is running on time, he learned that's not true. You can't trust that because of what's happening. So this is Brandon Rains, who lives in West Hollywood. He said that he had more buses canceled on him in January than ever before. And that's not a surprise, is it? So especially in the last month of January, about 6 of my bus's trips out of 14 that I took were canceled, and it doesn't count 2 that never showed up. Okay, so there were 2 that didn't even show up, and he had to abort his plans altogether. So meanwhile, this month, LA Metro started charging fares again. Okay, after pausing them. They had paused them during the COVID because, nobody's trying to put change and touch people's money and all that, wallets and all that. You don't know, a lot of handling. So now I guess you have to get like one of those tap cards where it's contactless money. I think they're trying to work on something like that. So after pausing them because of the pandemic, so it kind of feels like a slap in the face when it's coming from the same time as the fares are being reinstated, he says. So if you can't even run the buses that are posted on your schedule, it really does erode the trust of the riders that they have in your system very quickly, very, very quickly. But part of the problem was the hiring freeze when the pandemic first had hit, according to Jessica Meany at investing in place. It's an LA-based transportation agency group. So when they realized they needed more buses, everybody realized they had lost a ton of bus drivers throughout that pandemic when it happened. So last month, the federal government awarded LA Metro more than $1 billion to help pay for pandemic expenses. But the agency says the current service cuts hopefully result in fewer canceled bus trips. But what really frustrates me is the funding is there, says meaning the riders are there. There's just no one to drive them. So that's pretty much the article. So I notice that is a big deal here, and that is going to hurt a lot of people who rely on the buses and in around the metro area of Los Angeles.